We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries and stealing our intellectual property, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end.
U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum are supposed to be directed at China and what the Trump administration calls unfair trading practices. But new numbers appear to contradict that and show the tariffs are hurting Canada more than China. Over the past year, the U.S. Commerce Department has excluded about 40% of Chinese steel imports from the 25% tariff. Meanwhile, only 2% of Canadian steel imports have been exempted. That means they're allowed to enter tariff-free. The discrepancy is actually even worse for aluminum. 86% of Chinese aluminum imports enter the U.S. tariff-free, compared to less than 1% of Canadian aluminum imports. If China is the intended target, as the White House claims, then how do these numbers add up? Christine McDaniel is a former White House economic advisor, now a senior research fellow with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. She joins us from Washington. Hi, Ms. McDaniel. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Before we start talking about the U.S. allowing more steel tariff-free from China versus Canadian steel, can you explain how and why countries are able to avoid those tariffs in the first place?
Yeah, so when this whole process started last year, the Commerce Department announced a tariff exclusion request process. And so if you're a U.S. manufacturer and let's say you need particular steel or aluminum and you can't get it here in the U.S. and you need to import it and you want to import it tariff-free and avoid those tariffs, you'll be excluded from those tariffs, you can file a tariff exclusion request form. And you fill out a form, or your lawyer does for you. It goes to Commerce, and then they look at it and examine it.
Okay, and you've looked at the data for countries that have applied for those, or companies that have applied for those tariffs, and where it's coming from, where the steel and aluminum is coming from. What did you find?
Well, so there's over 50,000 tariff exclusion requests that have been filed so far, as of December 20th, that is. This is over 10 times the amount that Commerce had originally expected. When this whole thing started, Secretary Ross said he expected about 4,500 requests to come in, and they've received over 50,000 so far. So they, underestimated the need for frankly, for U.S. manufacturers' access to globally competitive priced steel and aluminum. And so what we found was not only is the volume so much greater than what they thought, but then we looked at it by country of export. So, when you're filing these requests, you have to put on what country of export you would get it from. And so we looked at the data that way. And what we found was that there was a very low amount being approved coming in from Canada and some other countries, but especially Canada, which was really striking, especially compared to with other countries like China, other countries across the globe that have been accused of severe subsidies. And so the approval rate for Canada is quite low compared to the approval rate for China. And then the amount of the volume that's been approved to come in compared to what we would normally bring in has been a tiny fraction for Canada and pretty high for China. So we actually at first didn't believe it. We ran the numbers 3 times. Because
it sounds kind of unbelievable.
Well, yeah.
Tariffs are supposed to be because of China. At least that's the political rhetoric, right?
Yeah, it raises some questions. I mean, if it really was about China, why did we do this in the first place? If they're letting in so much more from China and so little from Canada, and then it also just raises the question of then you look at where it is coming in from. China, many other countries. It seems just to be shuffling the country of origin around, leaving U.S. manufacturers facing higher prices, and it's not clear that it's really achieving the goal.
What's the process like for approving or rejecting an application, and how much discretion is built into that process?
Well, Commerce has stated that they have a process, and they, when this whole thing started, they thought it would take 90 days to process each request. So, and then we've looked at the data, and 76% of all the requests have actually taken longer than 90 days. So it's taken them longer than expected, and then also over half are still pending. So that's also an issue, because if you're a U.S. manufacturer, effectively it's the same as being denied if it's still pending. Mm-hmm. So when you file, so let's say I'm a U.S. manufacturer, I file a tariff exclusion request. Then a U.S. steel maker or a U.S. aluminum maker has 30 days to file an objection to my request. And then I have 7 days to rebut their objection. And then they have another 7 days to surrebut my rebuttal. So it's quite a process. And there's a lot of back and forth, but the objections, it turns out, really do matter, because of all of everything that's been objected to has either been denied or pending. And out of the 50,000 tariff exclusion requests, there's only been one that's been approved that has had an objection. So the objections matter.
I guess, yeah, I'm just trying to understand why so many Canadian companies would be excluded. Is it because there are, I mean, I gather from what you're saying, there must have been a lot of objections where the country of origin is Canada.
Yeah, there are a lot of objections. In fact, Canada does receive a lot more objections than some of China and many other Asian and Middle Eastern.
Do you know why that
countries.
is?
No, I do not know why that is. Those are very good questions. The objection process is also raises questions. So it turns out there's about a small handful of U.S. steel makers that are filing the vast majority of the objections. And we also looked at the objections, and we found that these steel companies were objecting to unrealistic quantities of steel compared to what they have been making on a yearly basis over the past 3 to 5 years. So it's not clear if Commerce is taking all that into account.
Wow, a lot more to dig into. Thank you very much for your time, Ms. McDaniel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.